Yeah. 39A 2. The Gemara, we spoke about the Mishnah spoke about the fact if a person buys a lulav from an Amoretz, someone buys a lulav from an uneducated Jew, the Mishnah had said, what's the issue? The issue is that maybe the etrog is a concern with the etrog. That the etrog might have been picked in the Shemitah year, and if it's picked in the Shemitah year, so it's the etrog is subject to the laws of Shemitah, the laws of the 7th year, and there's some concern of buying a etrog during the Shemitah year from the uneducated Jew. If he would be an educated Jew, the Mishnah seems to indicate there would not be a problem for you to buy the buying from the uneducated Jew. But again, if he's an educated Jew, no problem. You could buy an etrog. If he's not an educated Jew, there's a problem. So the Gemara wants to know what's the problem. And of course, today's day and age, if you would buy from an educated Jew, there wouldn't be a problem. But that's if you're buying small amounts or under certain circumstances. But if it's large amounts, then there would be issues even buying from an educated Jew. But here the Gemara says, what's the problem? The problem is because you can't give money of Shemitah to an Amoritz. You can't buy produce from during the Shemitah year. There's a problem of buying produce from Amoritz. What's the problem? The problem is, what is he going to do with the money? How is he going to spend the money that he received for the produce of Shemitah? There are certain laws about that money that was received in exchange for produce that he was concerned that the Amoritz, the uneducated Jew, is not going to follow. Is that clear, Mr. Haber? What the issue is? And that's why we can't buy. That's why we have an issue of paying a nice price for the etrog, because the concern is that if you give him, morning Ralph, if you give the uneducated Jew a nice amount of money for the etrog, he's gonna store away that money for after Shemitah. Or maybe he's going to use that money to buy things that are not permitted to buy with money of Shemitah. There are specific items that could be used. You could buy food, certain types of things you could buy with Shemitah money that was things that have the holiness of Shemitah on it. So the money that was received for the fruit of Shemitah also has holiness to it. The money has certain limitations, restrictions, and laws of what could you do with that money. And the Amoretz, the uneducated Jew, you cannot trust that he's going to use that money the way it needs to be used. Just like we found, if you buy maaser, if you buy produce during a non-Shemitah year, there were a minority of the uneducated Jews that did not take off the tithes for the Levi. They did not take off the maaser. There was and therefore, as a result of that, the rabbi said that when you buy from the uneducated Jew, you have to separate maaser, because even though he should have done it, but since it's a minority of people that don't do it. Good morning, Jaime.
Morning.
Therefore, we have to go ahead and separate the maaser. So that's what the Gemara said. The Gemara said we said if you're during the Shemitah year and you want to buy a lulav and etrog hadasim and aravot, and you're buying it from an uneducated Jew, so you're supposed to go ahead, according to Rashi, you're supposed to make a request of him that I want you to sell me please don't sell me the etrog. I'm going to give you a higher price for the lulav. Meaning, first, obviously, you tell him, you know what, Shemitah, it's a Shemitah year. So really, you tell him, could you give me, you tell him, could you give me the etrog as a gift? And I will give you a higher price for the lulav. And that's how you would go ahead and first the Gemara says, you request of the Amor to give it to you, the etrog, as a gift. It's a Shemitah, yeah, give it to me as a gift. But if he doesn't want to give it to you as a gift, the Gemara says, then you just swallow up the etrog in the lulav by paying a higher price for the lulav, and he'll accept that. He'll be willing to give you or gift you the etrog, as long as he's going to get, at the end of the day, he's getting a much higher price for the lulav. So that's what the Gemara said. If you look at the Gemara on 39a2, the Gemara says, Lo ratza lo matana, if the non-educated Jew did not want to give it to the person, to the educated Jew, as a gift, he didn't want to give the etrog as a gift. So Mahu, what do you do? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna mavliya le etrog b'lulav. You go ahead and you swallow up the etrog in the lulav, meaning you sell the lulav at a higher price until he's willing to give you the etrog as a gift. And now, if he gives you the etrog as a gift, so now there's no issue, because if you give the etrog as a gift, so now the Amoret does not have Shemitah money for the etrog. If he gives you the etrog as a gift, he has not received money for the etrog because it was given to you as a gift. So the Gemara says, what's the problem? The Gemara says, why can't you buy the etrog from the Am Haaretz? What's the problem? The etrog, let's say the field was hefker, the field was open for everybody to take. He took the locks off the field, he opened up the gates. So the etrog grew in a proper kosher fashion during the Shemitah year. And now he wants to sell you, and there are certain situations that if the Tosfos points out that if one person harvested an etrog, and his son sells it, that it's not the same person who harvested and sells it. There are allowances for sale in such a circumstance. There are different situations that, under certain circumstances, business can be done, maybe in small amounts. Business can be done with produce of Shemitah. So that's the Gemara's question. Why can't the person give the money directly for the etrog under the conditions in a way that business can be done with, under certain circumstances, that you could do business with produce of Shemitah? So that's what the Gemara's question is. So the Gemara answers that it is a different issue. That even if it would be a way that there's no problem of an actual sale, that it's not a problem, it doesn't meet the problem of doing business with fruits of Shemitah, because it was done not in the normal way of business, but there's a different problem. What's the problem? The Gemara says, you cannot give the money You cannot give money for fruits of Shemitah to an Am Haaretz. Now, what does that mean? The Gemara is going to say, or the commentaries are saying, what's the problem? If I go ahead and I buy an etrog from an uneducated Jew, and if the actual sale did not violate the issue of business with produce of Shemitah, because it was done not in, let's say, in the normal way of of business, and on a business level, I did not. There's no issue because I didn't do in the way that will violate the business aspect. But nevertheless, I gave money for fruit of Shemitah. I bought produce of Shemitah. That money that was given for the produce has the same laws as the produce itself. Is that clear? Now, just like the produce of Shemitah has specific laws, so too the money has specific laws. And what some of the issues would be, I can't go ahead and store away produce of Shemitah for after Shemitah. I have to use it up during the Shemitah year. It's not supposed to be stored away. That's one thing about the Shemitah produce. And another thing is I can't take Shemitah produce and buy with it clothing. I can't say I go to a store and say, you know what, here's fruit that grew during the Shemitah. I want to go exchange the fruit, but a barter system. I want to buy a raincoat, a fleet raincoat. I can't buy a fleet raincoat with the etrog money, because that etrog money I can't use. I can't with the produce. I can't take the produce that grew during the Shemitah and go into a store and say I want that coat. Give me a coat. I'll give you the fruit of Shemitah. The same way I can't do that with the fruit of Shemitah, with the produce of Shemitah, Mr. Haber. I can't go ahead and the money that was given to the seller when I bought the produce. When I bought the produce from Ralph was selling. He sold it in a permitted fashion. He sold the produce not in the normal way of business that would violate doing business with Shemitah produce. He sold it in a permitted fashion, and therefore I was able to buy from Ralph some good apples and good oranges. But Ralph, who's now sold, now Ralph received money from me for those apples and oranges. Ralph cannot go and buy a coat with that money. Usually, a person has money in his hands. He usually buys anything with money that you have in your hand. You don't use, but when it comes to Shemitah money, which is similar to Meiser Sheni, when you redeem Meiser, you have Meiser Sheni, you redeem on the coins. There's specific things you could use with that money, that Meiser Sheni money. You go to Yerushalayim and you go and you buy certain things. You can't just buy a coat with the Meiser Sheni money. So the same way that when you redeem Meiser Sheni onto money, the money has that sanctity, certain laws, what you could do with that money. So too, even the money that was received for the produce of Shemitah, that money is restricted for certain purchases. And therefore, what's the concern? That the Am Haaretz, the seller, not Ralph will do the right thing with it, the uneducated Jew, he'll take that money. Good morning, Murray. He'll take that money and he'll buy things with that money that he's not allowed to. So therefore, and then if I go in and I buy so if I would buy from the uneducated Jew, I am setting up the uneducated Jew for a sin. I am putting a stumbling block, like lifnei iver lo sitei mechshol. The Torah says you can't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. That doesn't only mean literally a stumbling block. It means if you're going to do something to create a sin as a result of you're setting a person up for sin, the famous case of a sin would be setting up someone for a sin. If let's say there's a Nazir, there's a person who vowed that he's not going to drink wine. Let's say usually the Nazir was a 30-day period, and the wine is on the other side of the river, and he has no way of getting there. If I bring him the wine, I facilitate the ability to do the sin. I set him up for sin. I am violating one of the 613 mitzvot of in front of a blind person, don't put a stumbling block. So that's the issue that Rashi says over here, that if I go ahead, so in life, you have to be worried about the next guy. And if you're going to go ahead and you're going to buy food from him during the Shemitah year, and especially if you're going to pay for an etrog, which is expensive, he's going to have a lot of money. He's going to get a decent amount of money. And there's a concern that he's going to go ahead and buy the wrong things with that money. So the Shemitah money, so the person that he's supposed to buy food, he's supposed to buy these type of items that are allowed to be bought with Shemitah money. You can't buy like produce, well, a certain similar items that are allowed to be bought. Most probably, I think oil would be able to be bought, for lighting. Certain things could be bought, but very limited of what you could use. Number one, you can't store away the money. Can't put the money in a savings account. So it has to be used. And number two, it has to also be certain specific items has to be used for. And Rashi points out another issue. Rashi points out an issue that there is a halacha called biur. Like we have the something called biur chametz. We say the bracha of biur chametz before we do the search by Pesach. So there is a law that when you take produce from the field of the Shemitah of produce that grew during and those harvest, whatever what produce that's subject to the laws of Shemitah, that as you take it into the house and you use it, you could use it in your house and keep it in your house as long as there's that type of produce that you took into your house is found in the field for the animals as well. The Torah said, but if there's no more of that produce, of that product, there's no more apples or there's no more oranges, you brought in apples or you brought in oranges, that type of product you brought into your house, if there's no more in the field, you have to remove it from your house. You have to put it outside and make it hefker, make it available for everybody. And the same way you have to do that with the produce that grew during the Shemitah, you also have to do, the money has the same law as the produce. You would have to take that money when it's no more left for the animals. If their money is still around, you have to go ahead and make that money hefker. You have to make, and he's not going to, he's not that uneducated Jew is not ready to go ahead and make that money available for anybody to take. The same, so therefore, we cannot buy from him produce during the Shemitah. However, a limited amount of produce of him, enough, let's say, that he could, let's say, on a Friday, if you're going to buy from him on a Friday, he could go ahead and, if you're going to buy from him a small amount, that's only enough money that he could buy 3 meals for Shabbat, so that we will allow. Because if it's a small amount, we're not worried, a small amount of money, we're not worried about his not using up the money during the Shemitah year. We're not worried he's going to put it into the bank, because a small amount of money, people will go ahead and we can say he'll buy food. He'll buy food with that amount of money. So therefore the money will be used in a permitted fashion. There wouldn't be a violation that maybe he's not going to, he won't, biur, he won't give up the money if it's no longer left in the field, because he already used up the money in a proper fashion, and he's not storing it away because it's a limited amount, small amount of money. When do people save up and leave for after Shemitah? When people save up money, when you have an excess, he has more than you need, but a small amount of money we say he'll use for the food. And therefore, once we allow it that you could give him that amount of money on a Friday, because maybe he needs that money for Shabbat, for the 3 meals of Shabbat, then you allowed him to go, even on a Sunday or a Monday, you could go ahead any day of the week, you could go ahead and buy from an uneducated Jew a limited minimal amount of business you could give him, not more than an amount of money that he could buy 3 meals of food, which is a very small amount of money to buy 3 meals of food. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, why don't we give the money on the right side of 39A2? Why don't we give the money? Why don't we give him directly the money for the etrog? Why do we got to go ahead and swallow up the etrog in the lulav and pay a higher price for the lulav? What's the issue? So the Gemara says the issue is you cannot give money for fruit, for produce of Shemitah to an Amoretz, to an uneducated Jew. The Tanya we learned in a Breita, ain't most in the May Perish Shemil Amoret. You cannot give the money for produce of Shemitah during the holy year, the Shemitah year, more than Shalosh Udos. You cannot give more than the value of buying 3 meals. Now, what happens in Mosar? What happened if you forgot? You forgot this law. You went ahead and you bought from the Amaretz more than the value of 3 meals. Let's say you bought produce from him that you could buy 10 meals, 20 meals he could buy. So we're concerned that maybe the Amaretz is going to store away the money. So what do we do? Is there a way to fix up in life? Sometimes people make mistakes, but many times you have the ability to fix up the mistake. Sometimes the Gemara says there are certain things that you can't fix up. The guy wakes up late in the morning and he missed the Zman Kriya Shema. The guy wakes up at 11 o'clock in the morning, he missed the Shema. He missed the Shema. The fact that he'll say the Shema and he'll daven, whatever, but he still missed out the mitzvah of saying Shema at a specific time. There's a certain time, 7 days a week, that the Shema needs to be said. Today, maybe it's, 8:50. There's different times, 8:55, maybe it's one time, maybe the other one about 9:25, something like that. Or 8:50 and 9:20. There's different, there's a later time, earlier time. But once you pass those times, you lost out the mitzvah of Shema on a Torah level. But there are certain times things you could fix up, right? The guy missed davening mincha. You can make up the mincha at Arvit, right? You do it 2 Shemon Esrei, 2 Amidas at Arvit. So here we're saying the guy made a mistake. He didn't follow the law. What did he do? He went ahead and he bought produce from an uneducated Jew more than the amount that he's allowed to buy. And there's a concern that money, let's say he bought $100 worth of produce from the uneducated Jew. So now the uneducated Jew has $100 in his hand, and there's a concern he's going to go ahead and buy a coat. Mr. Haber, right? He wants to buy a coat from you, correct? And so that would be a sin for him to go buy a coat with that $100 of Shemitah money. He could use other money for buying a coat, but he can't use the Shemitah money to buy a coat. That money he's supposed to buy food, buy oil. He has certain things that he's allowed to do with that money. The 3 meals is that when you're purchasing from the uneducated Jew, the purchaser should not buy something more than the value of 3 meals out of concern that the seller will go ahead and take if it's more than 3 meals of value, he'll take that money and use it for other things. But now I went ahead and the buyer made a mistake. He bought $100 worth of produce from the uneducated Jew. So is there a way to fix it up? So we say So the way Rashi learns, it sounds like it's a real fix. What's the real fix? Then now you go ahead and you say the money, that $100 that I gave him, I gave him for the purchase of this fruit. I want that money, the holiness of that money, to be transferred onto fruit that I have in my house. I have fruit in my house that is not Shemitah fruit. I got fruit from last year. I got fruit that was, let's say that grew, that blossomed during the 6th year. And let's say that produce that from the trees, those apples and those oranges from last year or whatever it was, and I stored it beautifully. I preserved it, very well. It didn't rot. That produce that's not subject to Shemitah, I want that $100 that I've given to the seller, that $100 to now be, the holiness should be transferred onto produce that I, the buyer, have in my house that's not subject to Shemitah. And now it will go on that produce, the holiness of Shemitah. And I, the buyer, will use that produce that in the proper halachic fashion that it needs to be used during as produce of Shemitah. So by doing that, that will go ahead and prevent the uneducated Jew from possibly doing a sin with the money. Because now I have removed the holiness of that money, and now that money, that $100 that the uneducated Jew is no longer sanctified, no longer subject to the laws of Shemitah and the restrictions and the limitations of what he could buy. And I'm going to be subject, I'm the buyer, and I'm going to do it right. So that produce I will eat during the Shemitah year, and I'll eat it according to the proper way. Being very careful not to waste anything, can't ruin anything from Shemitah, and I will treat it the right way. That if that produce is nothing left in the field, at a certain point, there's nothing left in the field for the animals, I will take that produce and bring it outside to the field and make it hefker, make it ownerless for anybody to take. And some commentaries say that once I make it hefker, I could go take it back as well. There's some opinions that learn. The Rambam seems to say I have to destroy it. If once there's no more left, if I have it left in my possession and there's nothing left for the animals, that has to be destroyed. Like you destroy chametz, you got to destroy that.
Storage of food, he went and bought more produce.
That he had a storage of food of non-Shemitah food, and he bought more than he should have from the uneducated Jew. He'll say that value of money that I paid to the uneducated Jew will go on to that same value of produce that I have in my storage house. Say it again. He wanted more fresh food. He wanted fresher food. And this Shemitah food was fresher food. He was having a party in his house, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, and he got to serve his best stuff, maybe. But so that's how Rashi seems to learn the Gemara. Tosfos points out that the question is, this is a very interesting thing. For me to go ahead and remove the holiness that's on the money that's no longer by me. You see, usually, if I have, let's say, Maisa Sheni, I have produce. And I go and I said that the holiness of the produce to Maisa Sheni should go on money. So usually the case is it's my Maisa Sheni, and I go ahead and I take this produce that belongs to me, and I go ahead and I put it onto money. But here the situation is, it's the money is by the seller. I bought produce. The money is by the seller. Do I have the ability to take money that's not by me, that's in the hand of somebody else, and mechalel it and remove the sanctity onto money that I have in my house when that money is not in my hands? It's not my money. Do we have such a precedent that if I own something I can go ahead and maybe redeem it under certain circumstances. But here, the money was already given over to the seller. I got produce. Now I'm going to take the money that was given over to the seller, and I'm going to have in mind that money that I bought and I gave him $100 that's in his hand. The sanctity of that money should go on to produce that I have in my possession. That is a matter of question. Does that work? Do I have the ability to take something that's by somebody else and remove its sanctity or something that's by me? That's what Tosfos. Tosfos says this is an argument in the Gemara Baba Kama. Does it work? Can I go ahead and remove the holiness of something when it's not by my possession? So Tosfos says, according to the opinion that says you cannot remove the sanctity of something when it's in someone else's possession, so how does it work over here? How is it a fix when I went ahead and I did it? And how is it a fix when I made a mistake and I sold the uneducated Jew more than I should have? How would that work? How can I go ahead and put down opinion in the Gemara over there? Good morning, Ezra. Welcome to the Shia. So happy to see you. We're learning about Shemitah. And we're learning about Shemitah, and there's laws about the produce of Shemitah. If you buy something from an uneducated Jew during the Shemitah year, and let's say the food that he sold you was harvested during the Shemitah, let's say whatever, let's say it was done in a way that was subject to the Shemitah. Let's say it blossomed during the Shemitah year. Certain food depends on the blossoming. Certain food depends on the harvesting. What's subject to Shemitah? But we have something that's called Shemitah produce. So if you buy Shemitah produce, the money that was given for the Shemitah produce has certain restrictions on what it's able to be used for. You cannot buy a coat with the money that you got received for selling apples and oranges for Shemitah. And in general, there's certain laws that can you even sell an orange or apple from Shemitah produce. There's a prohibition of doing business with Shemitah produce, but there are circumstances, if you don't do it in the normal way of business, you could do business, maybe small amounts, or if different people, one person harvested it, another person sold it. There are different situations that under certain circumstances you could sell in certain way produce of Shemitah. But even though you're allowed to sell produce of Shemitah within certain terms and conditions, the money still is holy. That you received the same way the produce has holiness, the Shemitah produce. You can't store Shemitah produce for after the Shemitah year. You can't, and you have certain laws of biur, of removal of certain Shemitah produce. That means you can take Shemitah produce and bring it into your house, as long as it's that produce in the fields, you can leave it in your house. But if there's nothing left in the field for the animals, then you got to remove from your house and put it back out to the field. That's called biur, like biur chametz. That's the removal of the. And then some say you can actually reclaim it. Some say you have to destroy it. There's a machlokas. What do you have to do? But the money that the seller received for the Shemitah produce is subject to the same laws as the Shemitah produce. And if you buy from an uneducated Jew, there's a concern. You know what the uneducated Jew is going to do with the money that he sold the Shemitah produce? He's going to buy a coat. He's going to go buy a car. He's going to go buy things that he's not allowed to buy with Shemitah money. Ezra, is it clear or not clear? He's going to. But he can't. But Shemitah money. Right, if he's an uneducated Jew, he's going to. Who knows what he's going to spend it? But really, he's only allowed to buy, let's say, food, maybe oil for lighting. There's only very limited things that you could buy with Shemitah money, and therefore we're concerned if you're going to buy produce from the non-educated Jew, you're setting him up for failure. You're putting a stumbling block in front of him. Because if you go ahead and you buy from him, he's not going to follow the terms and the conditions with that money. And he's going to go ahead and what? And buy things that he's not allowed to. So therefore, you're not allowed to buy from him the produce because of that reason. Fascinating. But what happened? You made a mistake. You bought the produce from him. Now, so then what is the Gemara? What do you do? But also the Gemara says you could buy up to 3 meals of value, because then he's going to buy food for Shabbat, or well, he'll buy food with it. But only if you buy more than 3 meals of value, then there's a concern that he's going to store it away, put it in the bank, or use it for on non-food items. But what do you do if you spend more than you should have? You bought more than the value of 3 meals. You bought $100 of produce from the non-educated Jew. So the Gemara says there's a way you can fix it. How can you fix it? You say that $100 that I gave him for the fruit, I want it to become the holiness should go on to other fruit that I have in my house, non-Shemitah fruit, should get that holiness. The money now loses its holiness and was transferred to the produce, that I had in my house. And I will treat that produce the way I'm supposed to treat the produce of Shemitah. That's what the Gemara says. Okay? Toso says that, there's a machloket in the Gemara Baba Kama. Can I transfer some holiness that's in the possession of someone else? Meaning, if I have my own Maisa Sheni, and it's too hard for me to carry it to Jerusalem, to eat in Jerusalem, I could transfer the holiness onto money and bring the money to Jerusalem and buy food in Jerusalem. But here, the money was given, I bought $100 worth of fruit. The money is by the Amaretz. Do I have the ability to take money that's by someone else and transfer that onto fruit that I have in my house? The money's in someone else's possession. So that Tosfos says it's a matter of a machloket in the Gemara. So Tosfos asks, according to the opinion that says that you cannot do that, you can't transfer the money from someone else's possession, the holiness that's by the seller onto produce of the buyer. So how does the Gemara, how do we say over here that this is what I do, but it's Shemitah produce? How can I do it? It's by the produce is by somebody else, the money is by someone else. How can I transfer the holiness that's that's on the money that's by someone else's possession onto fruit that's in my house? The Tosfos says this is a fine, defining the knas. Really, Tosfos is saying, according to Tosfos' understanding, according to that opinion, I have no way of fixing my mistake. There's certain mistakes in life. A guy kills someone, you can't bring the guy back. Yes, you could do shuvah, still repentance. But there's certain things. We gave the example of a guy misses Zman Kriya Shema in the morning. Guy sleeps late, gets up at 11. He missed the mitzvah Kriya Shema at the right time. He blew it. There's no makeup for that. So here, you can't fix the sin, but the rabbis want to give you a fine. They're going to fine you that you're going to have to go ahead and take other produce that's in your house and treat it with the holiness of Shemitah. The value that you gave you gave $100 to that guy, you're going to go ahead and you're going to say the holiness of that $100 should go onto your produce. And you're going to treat that produce with holiness, which is going to limit you what you could do with the produce. In general, if you have produce, non-Shemitah produce, you could do what you want with it. You want to barter it for a coat, you could buy a coat with your non-Shemitah produce. But now that you made this mistake and you weren't careful, and you sold the $100 worth of produce to a non-educated Jew, we're going to give you a fine. We're going to fine you. You're going to have to take $100 of your produce, non-Shemitah produce, and treat it, go through this process. So that is an interesting concept. And if you find the person, then he's going to be more careful in the future, and he won't make that mistake and forget these type of things. So that's what the Gemara says. The Mosar, and if he did give him Yoma, you should say, Hare Ma'ot Halalu, this money that I gave him for the fruit, it should go ahead and go, the sanctity go on the fruit that I have in my house, and then you go ahead and you eat that fruit with the holiness of Shemitah. We should be zocher to have Eretz Yisrael back and in its full sense, with the coming of Mashiach, and we should be zocher to all following all the laws of Shemitah. Today, there are many farmers, Baruch Hashem, in Israel that keep the laws of Shemitah, and these are we should be zocher that we all should be in Israel. We all be subject to fulfilling those laws of Shemitah. Have a great day, everybody. We welcome Ezra.